welcome to the Planet Positive webinar, a hybrid beauty event hosted from the ICE Hub in Glasgow and brought to you by the Sustainable Beauty Coalition, many of whose members, or some of whose members, are actually in Glasgow as part of the big conference to tackle climate change. Now, this event has been sponsored by some really very sustainably focused beauty brands. We have Beauty Kitchen, Elemis, Floral Street, Holland & Barrett, Lush, Provenance, Weleda, who've very generously enabled this conference to take place. So we're very happy to welcome you. And I'd like to introduce our panel guests. We have Jayn Sterland, the chair of the Sustainable Beauty Coalition and the managing director of Weleda UK.
Hello, everybody.
Oriele Frank, hello Jayn. Oriele Frank, the Chief Product and Sustainability Officer and co-founder of Elemis.
Hello.
Hi, Oriele. Joanne Chidley, who is the founder of Beauty Kitchen. Hi, Joanne.
Hi.
And Jessi Baker, MBE from Provenance. Hello.
Hi.
And Helen Cox, the Global Environmental Reporting Lead for Lush.
Hello.
Hi, Helen. And of course, in the matching green top, so very easy to remember, and like me, we're the only two in London, Michelle Feeney, founder of Floral Street Fragrances. Hi, Michelle.
Hiya.
I'm going to get stuck in because we only have an hour and we have lots of questions. The focus for this event really was how can we make greener beauty choices? And one of the reasons it's happening is because I, as a journalist, was trying to write a piece about sustainable beauty bias. A simple enough task, but it's actually really difficult because, as we all know, it's very hard reporting in this arena. It's very much an area where we're testing new things. The world is trying out new things. There's a lot of great lateral thinking going on, but it's quite hard as both a consumer and people in the industry not to be skeptical. You can't just judge things by packaging. Some brands that look very sustainable, in fact, are not that brilliant with recycling or refillable things. There are lots of red flags. And really the first question, and perhaps one of the most important questions is, which I'm going to put to you, Jayn, who can we trust when every brand has a vested interest to be seen to be green? And what are the red flags that we should be on high alert for? Who are we like really looking to for hard facts and figures?
Gosh, Kathleen, that's a great question to begin with, and thank you for giving it to me. Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? How do we really know what kind of beauty we're using? How do we know that the brand that we're using is a purpose-led brand as opposed to being driven by profit? Because that's the basis of the industry, quite frankly. And we've seen a massive proliferation of things like organic beauty, vegan beauty, even clean beauty, chemical-free beauty, which quite frankly doesn't exist. And that's why we all came together. So you're looking at some of the founding members of the Sustainable Beauty Coalition. And we're up here in Glasgow at COP26. We have observer status, which is just amazing. So we're really trying to listen and to see what we as an industry can do. So things like looking at the carbon that we're using. Joe, I listened to you earlier and you were talking about, 80% of it's actually quite easy, but 80% is where we're going to start. So, things like looking at the carbon that we're using, the ingredients, how can we make our supply chains much more sustainable? Our packaging, we know we've got a massive issue with the amount of plastic that we use. But it's a very, very complex and very complicated area. So I'd love to give you a one-line answer, Kathleen. It isn't as simple as that. But you can look for certifications. You can look for independently certified quality marks that they're independent bodies that come in and check you're doing what you say you're doing. The Competition Monopolies Alliance, the CMA, have just got together and produced a green guide on what we can actually say as an industry. So particularly within consumer goods, how can you trust the marketing? And that's the really big question. And also we as brands just need to be more transparent, because the bottom line is today, if you want to buy something that is completely sustainable for your bathroom, quite frankly, there isn't anything. because even how we use the product, and we'll probably get onto that later, has a carbon footprint. So it's a very messy, complicated problem, but we as the beauty industry are working together in coalition to try to make sure that we work not in isolation, but come together, because all of these problems, very, very complicated problems, we all share. And actually, our industry is so innovative, we know that we can come up with the answers.
Just very quickly, because the Sustainable Beauty Coalition is a relatively new body, isn't it?
It is, yes. It was founded 6 months ago. Although it's amazing how much we've done in just 6 months.
It is amazing, but you know, as I said in the question, every brand has a vested interest to be seen to be green, and there are so many now bodies. That's almost a part of the problem, isn't it? Do you think that we need, I mean, it's fantastic, we're all talking about things, but do you think that there needs to be a sort of a government type of regulation of things, or you know, in the same way that perhaps the FDA exists in America, do we need something like that but for sustainability in Britain, or does it exist already and I just haven't found it? Probably. But I mean, do you think, you know, if you look, there's organizations like Positive Luxury, for example, and do you feel like, I mean, I guess perhaps the question really is, even the Sustainable Beauty Coalition will have an element of a vested interest. It's impossible almost to separate profit from purpose in this day and age. We all want to make a profit, whether we are purpose driven or not. So what do you hope is the Sustainable Beauty Coalition perhaps a good starting point for a journalist or a consumer or someone else in the industry to start thinking, okay, I want to know that what I'm getting is as sustainable as possible? Yeah,
and you've just described the biggest problem. I guess I'll take a step back and say 6 months ago, and I've been working for 14 years for an amazing brand called Vogue, and we've been going for 100 years in sustainability. I guess I was very naive. I knew what we did, but I didn't really know what the rest of the industry did. And not a day it's gone by that I haven't heard about a new initiative, some amazing work, some incredible companies doing some amazing work, but we need to share it. So number one is that it's very, very complicated, as I've said, and it's only by coming together and sharing best practice and actually understanding that, you know, we're all part of the solution and we're not in competition. We need to work together. And then the second thing is to understand that particularly our industry is made up of small and medium-sized companies and some very, very big ones, but the majority is small and medium-sized, so employing less than 250 people. And we don't really have the resources to have, you know, sustainability officers and people that can really explain to us what carbon tax means and so on. So one of the great things that I think will come out of the British Beauty Council and our coalition is demystifying and making it very easy for starter brands, small companies, you know, hair salons, to really understand how we can make a significant difference, but by demystifying it and making it easy. And then the final thing I would say is that I don't think it's about government, quite frankly. I think government needs to bring in a carbon tax, because at the moment we're only being taxed on things like profit. We're not actually being taxed on the damage that we're doing to the environment and to the planet. So I do think carbon tax is really important. But the most important thing for me is for us all to show individual leadership. Because I just think waiting for the government is just another way of us not taking responsibility for the damage that we're doing. So it's up to every single person. And we're not just talking about sustainability and beauty. We're talking about the fact that, you know, it's code red. We're here at COP26. We're hearing that if we don't do something immediately, then we're looking at 2.7 degree temperature rise by the end of the century. If we do something immediately, we might be looking at 1.5, 1.8%. But every single person on the planet, all 7 billion of us, have a responsibility. And when it comes to money, and this is something I've learned in the last couple of days, and it always comes down to money, I'm afraid, that there is so much money locked up in the commercial side, in private business, way more than you'd ever get from the government. And we need to channel that, and we need to channel it together to make the big difference. Thank you.
Oriele, I'd like to bring you in now, because, you know, with your experience at Elemis in particular, I mean, you've seen a company grow. I mean, Relator, actually, we're both very well-established brands. But would you say, is there a sliding scale of priorities, for example, or a simple methodology that as a consumer or as, you know, any other person in the beauty industry, you can look at and instantly determine how effective a company's big claims are for sustainability? Because, for example, you know, refills, let's take refills, they're a great option, but not if you have to then ship the product back to the Southern Hemisphere to be refilled, for example. I mean, glass bottles, we all love glass bottles, but they're heavy to ship. And yet, you know, you can't switch to, if you're producing something like perfume, which has alcohol in it, you have to have a glass bottle. So where is the sliding scale of priorities? I mean, I always worry about I personally put people first and then animals. And then I also worry about the planet, but the thought of children, you know, mining mica in parts of India is horrendous to me. So where is this? Where are our priorities? What should we be putting above each other in order to try to work out what to buy?
It's such a great question, and you know, I've just started this role a year ago, so similar to you, it was like demystifying. Where do I start? And the first thing I realized that obviously the climate, it comes at the top because that is the crisis that we're all dealing with. You know, if we don't do something about these greenhouse gas emissions and trying to reduce them, then our planet's going to be a very different place. People are going to be displaced. They're going to have to move. There'll be mass migration. So that's where we start. And that came from the Lottstown group. You know, that helped me simplify. If I start there. So first of all, companies have to set measurable targets. If we don't measure anything, how can we improve? And that takes time. So there are science-based targets. It's an initiative that you have to sign up to. You have to literally measure every aspect of your carbon footprint. I've only done it once. It was a huge job. We worked with an agency. We're now going to do it year on year, but I learned so much. I found out that our biggest greenhouse gas emissions was our consumer using our product. Cleansing 3 litres of water, using warm water to cleanse her face, or in the shower, 35 litres.
No more double cleansing, people.
I know, well, cold water cleansing is what we're all going to champion, and then we're all fine. Yeah. So yeah, it's all about measuring and then learning and then addressing that and then reduction. So that was like the first real sort of moment. And, you know, how are we going to get to this carbon net zero? And we're going to have to, apparently 90% is what we're aiming for of a reduction by 2030. The only way we're going to be able to do that is measure it. So every year, as a group, Lottstown, as LMS, we will be measuring that to see if we're actually improving. So it's a huge ask. The second thing that made it really simple to me was the circularity and, you know, learning from Jo and her team. You know, it's the 5 R's. Let's just start with what can we remove? What don't we need? Do we really need to put a plastic spatula? I literally went and asked loads of journalists and loads of consumers. Do we need a plastic spatula in every box? If someone wants it, they can get one. So we got rid of those. Then do we need all this leaflets now with the digital world that we can put it all online, get rid of leaflets? Do we even need boxes? That's the next question that we're asking ourselves. So it's first of all, what do you remove? What can you reduce? I came from the era, the bigger, the better, Christmas gift boxes, the larger. Everything is about as small as possible. It doesn't. That's much, much better. So reduce. Then you get to reuse, refill, which is critical. You know, we should be able to use the one bottle between multiple companies, the milkman model. We can see it all coming back. So we've got to really rethink our whole industry and our whole packaging and what we're using. And then right at the end, because we always start with recycling, is it recyclable? But actually the last thing is recycling. So we have to start by removing and reducing and then refills and reuse. And then what can we recycle? Is there materials, obviously glass, steel, aluminium, hugely recyclable, infinitely, but take a lot of energy. Is it takes more energy than making plastics? So big debate. Are you better off using plastics to those materials? So I think the 5 R's is absolutely key. And then finally, actually, we're looking at the nature aspect as well. And that is incredible. We have to look at what are we doing? I hadn't really thought about everything going down the plug hole. What is that doing to the environment, to the water, to the animals, to us who are re-ingesting it. So it's really looking at the biodegradability of the product. We're working to over 95% on all new products, but really getting into what is in our product. Is it doing anything damaging to the environment? And so I think, and then also looking, what can we as an industry put back into nature? So, you know, we're looking at, and we have it on our doorstep here in the UK, you know, we have peatlands, we have salt marshes, we have seaweeds around the coastline, all sequestering carbon. But we need to actually get involved in these projects, which aren't that directly related to our sort of commercial business. But actually, can we do projects to support these incredible wildlife trusts that are working to really sequester the carbon? Because I know with Elemis, you know, we're striving for growth. So I have to look at how I can put something back into nature to offset that.
Thank you. And this is probably a good juncture for me to mention. It's the British Beauty Council today also launched the Planet Positive Beauty Guide, which is actually pretty comprehensive at laying out all the sort of, as I said, sliding scale or the methodology of how you can see whether something is working on a sustainability scale. Jo, I would like to turn to you to answer this next question, which is, you know, on a positive note, there are some really exciting new technologies out there, and different ways of thinking about things. And one of the things I really love about talking about sustainability is whilst it's obviously there's some, you know, this is a code red situation, there is an immense amount of positivity, and it's wonderful to see everybody coming together. What have you seen? I mean, what's the atmosphere in Glasgow today, for example? There was that fantastic news yesterday about deforestation. But what are you hearing? And generally, what are you thinking is something pretty exciting that is going to change the way we think about our beauty consumption and how we make products for the industry?
So I'll just take them sort of one step at a time. When it comes to new innovation and you thinking about net zero, COP26, the circular economy, all of this was done many years ago. So it's not really new technology. The majority of it is before the linear economy was invented, where you take resources, you make something and you waste it and dump it. So you maybe use it, but the majority of it disappears, which isn't commercially viable in my head, because why would you want to do that? And that's why the circular economy, although that term has been coined by the guys that wrote Cradle to Cradle, you know, it's simply the better way to do business, yeah? But where technology and new innovations come into play is the digital age, which we didn't have 50 years ago. Well, it was in its infancy. We have that now. We have provenance from a traceability perspective. We have QR codes to asset track all of your packaging or ingredients for that matter. So it's about leveraging that technology with the traditional way of doing things where you didn't waste anything, because that's the challenge that we have today. How many of us, including me, have things in our bathrooms we've never opened, we've never used, or we've used once and went, I don't really like that. And rather than, you know, maybe using them for somebody else or giving them to someone else, they sit on the bathroom shelf because we don't really know what to do with them. I think, you know, for me, that's where the innovation is happening. And that's where the green economy, the green recovery, it's about changing the way that we do things, not just in the beauty industry, but in every industry on this planet, because we are all interconnected. Whether that's from a nature perspective or a technical perspective, everything is interconnected. However, there is lots of greenwashing, if we want to tag that, out there. So people need to be armed with the right information and the right data points. And that's, for me, where third-party verification marks come into play. There was a question on the chat that I just wanted to answer as well, which was around how do you measure your carbon footprint if you're a small business? We're a small business, 16. We're not the smallest. But there is a company out there called Green Element. If you do a browser search, they have a free carbon footprint for very small businesses. And it's a sliding scale in terms of how much you have to pay, just to get that in there. And then I've forgotten the last bit you asked me. Well done. Go.
I asked you was, or maybe even the first bit was, I wanted to, can you give me one specific example of a brilliant bit of lateral thinking that?
Definitely. Definitely. I'm going to plug our products. No, I'm not. Well, I am. Elvis's products, yes. So what we are big on at a beauty kitchen is we're big on reuse. So there's lots of talk around plastic. There's lots of talk around recycling. What we wanted to do was put a lens on reusable formats. How can you reuse packaging? It's not the answer to everything. It's not the silver bullet, because that doesn't exist. But it shines a light on being able to reuse bottles, but using digital technology, and to prove that you might be a beauty brand like Beauty Kitchen, who's small, indie and not well known, to Elemis, that is a global brand and very well known, but also in different areas within the beauty industry. And we can use the same packaging. You know, people think, my goodness, that's innovative. No, it isn't. It's just we've never tried it before. And we've proved that it can work. And the reduction in carbon emissions is phenomenal. And that's where working in a collaborative way and sharing the learnings, for me, it's about people. It is about planet, it is about profit, and it's about the triple bottom line. But when you talk about profit, that doesn't necessarily mean money, just money. Profit can mean many different things, and they have to be equal. You can't place one against the other, although some come out of balance, then you have to rebalance.
Sorry, can we backtrack a bit? I don't understand what you mean. You're using the same, did you say the same bottle or the same production as Elemis?
So we're using the same packaging. So the packaging is has been produced by the Beauty Kitchen team. It's called and what you do with it is you return it, we clean it, it gets refilled, and then you repeat. So there's a cycle. But what it means with this particular stainless steel bottle that has an Elemis label on it, this bottle is used by Beauty Kitchen, it's used by Elemis, and it will be used by many other brands as well. What that does is that gives the scalability within the reuse model and the cleaning protocols that have to sit behind it. So it means that in terms of options for a brand like Elemis, they don't have to lean as heavily on single-use packaging, for instance. They can have a reusable packaging system.
Okay, because it's reusable. Thank you, Jo. Helen, I'd like to talk to you now. I have a question for you. Do we have to make a choice between putting the ethical treatment of people first, or animals, or the planet? This is something that drives me crazy, so I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say about this. What are your personal and professional responsibilities, and as companies generally, more perhaps, how have you made those changes happen? So really the question is, people first, animals, or the planet? How do we think about things?
You don't have to choose. It's entirely possible to have all three. So as Jo said, so everything that is living on the planet is this interconnected web of life. So, you know, the animals, the people, the plants, the fungi, absolutely everything else. When one flourishes, the other flourish. It's just a feedback system. It's regenerative. Everything should work together in harmony. So you definitely don't feel like you have to choose. Hunt out brands that prioritize all three. Hunt out, you know, different ingredients that, you know, give like a tree that gives a home to birds and has growing projects to help the people that are actually cultivating those. There's so many different options out there. It's just one of those things that you need to look for and really challenge brands on. It's one of the reasons actually that we've created the guide as well. It explains how all of these things work and the different marks to look out for. Personally, I think, how have I made that choice? I have, you know, I've taken up a way of living, especially in the last few years, working for Lush, which I'll get to in a minute, because Lush is a phenomenal company for all three of these. We really stick to our core values, and that's that all three things are equal. I've been getting out there in nature. I've been changing the way that I live. I've been changing my diet, so I've gone plant-based to try and cut down my carbon footprint and be kind to the animals and actually the supply chains within that. I've stopped lounging about on the sofa, binging lots of TV shows, and I've got an allotment and got out in nature, and it's amazing what it does for you as a person. Also, you know, the planet, you're putting that little bit back into the earth, you're growing your own food. Halloween just gone, I carved a pumpkin that I grew, and then I cooked the pumpkin after, so it's, you know, nothing goes to waste. It's just made me feel quite wholesome and like I was living the good life. But that's something that I picked up from Lush and the way that they do things. So I'm relatively new to Lush. I've been back there for just over a year and a bit. So I joined during the pandemic, and it was really my light in those quite dark times, because I looked really into the history of the company and how we've always done things. And it's very much a regenerative way. So we focus on people care, earth care, and fair share. So that's all three of those tenets, and it's just working together to make sure that this living system really does go well, and it's a positive feedback loop. But you absolutely don't have to choose. There's so many amazing brands out there that prioritize all three. It's just doing a bit of research, digging into the brands and getting to know what's in the products that you're using.
Which is not as easy as it sounds.
It's absolutely not, because like you said earlier, some brands shout about things and maybe they're not doing exactly the right thing, but it's one of the reasons we've done this guide, is to really help people to...
Some brands are like halfway through making a switch, so some of their products are recycled plastic that can also be recycled, recycled, and then other parts of their componentry are still, you know, virgin plastic. It is difficult, I think, but I appreciate what you're saying, and I loved hearing about how you've done your own bit of regenerating during lockdown. That's really positive. Thank you. Next question, because we've still got a lot to get through. Michelle, over to you, my fellow green shirted person on the panel. What advice would you have for any new brand getting started and wanting to be planet positive? Because it's expensive, isn't it? Some of the comments that are coming through on the side, in my little comment chat box on the side on my laptop, are, you know, people with small businesses. They find it difficult to. We mentioned before the link to the carbon tracking, and there is that link. Thank you for that, Joe. But a lot of people with small businesses, it is difficult, or is it? What advice would you have, Michelle?
Okay, first of all, do not start a brand or a product line or launch anything unless it can be planet positive. I have had the privilege of being in the beauty industry for over 30 years. I've been part of senior management groups that have built billion-dollar brands around the world, including MAC Cosmetics. I launched Crème de la Mer, and I decided, I had an idea for a brand with the name Floral Streets, and then I took a gap year to think about whether the world needed any more product. So even me, who'd had this big time in beauty, and when I looked at the fragrance industry, I saw that it really was way behind. And I got most of my inspiration from the food industry at that point. They were packaging differently, they were messaging differently, there was bodies that could help guide the consumer. And I decided to instill that from the very, very, very beginning of the brand. So anybody who wants to start something, you've got to start from the ingredients, who I work with. I work with Robertet, who are the most natural ingredients around the world, the supply chain. They take care. If you think about harvesting, you go in and you harvest a flower or an ingredient, it's a one-time harvest. That community needs taking care of all the year round. So it's from how your ingredient is grown and harvested through to how you put that together in your product, the packaging. I went to a 180-year-old paper mill in the Lake District who had never done pulp packaging for beauty, and that was where I put all my money into to change how that was packaged. Everybody said, you're crazy putting that beautiful bottle in a pulp package. We were the first ones to go on British Airways that wasn't cello wrapped. You look at, so, you know, I thought about absolutely every element before I started. There's some things I couldn't solve or couldn't change, and we're evolving into that. And I think the rest of the group here that are amazing, you know, we've all talked about the different ways in which we have to learn from each other. But what I think is quite interesting is startups, or I call myself an upstart, you know, actually have the ability to think differently and act differently more quickly. So Joe, the same, you know, big, heavy companies, it takes them a long time to change. Whereas if you're a bit agile at the beginning, you can do that. Even down to what partners you work with. We're distributed with Sephora in the US, and they have been doing a clean beauty guide. It's not perfect, but they listen to their consumers and what they don't want, and then they ask you as a supplier to not put those things in your product. So to me, it's not just one thing. If you're thinking of starting something, what are you going to put in it? What are you going to package it in? If you can refill, fantastic. It's very difficult as you grow globally to put refill systems in. As you know, we refill in our Covent Garden store, but we can't do that around the world as we grow. So you do have to balance that. How do I grow to be big enough to be able to make changes? And as far as technology is concerned, I know Jo talked about this, but yes, you can develop new technologies. Yes, you can. There's a lot of really interesting companies out there trying to do things differently, and it's just seeking them out, really. And we're in the beauty industry. People want to feel beautiful. It makes you feel good about yourself. So we always have to keep that in mind. But if there's a way in which you can also make somebody feel good about that purchase by being authentic, transparent, like the group has said already, but we always put on the back who we work with, FSD certified board. You can make these changes, and I think, if you're starting a brand or a product, even a single product, think about it first. Does the world need what you're bringing in? Or for me, what I did it for was to make some change, actually. Because yes, probably the world doesn't need another fantastic fine fragrance, but I realised, after working for MAC and being involved with the MAC AIDS Fund and change, beauty can change things. And for me, this was a bit of brand standing, standing up and saying, I'm going to challenge the big boys by doing a pulp package and putting all my, being very open and authentic,
More of that type of packaging coming through, so it's clearly working. I want to ask Oriele, I'm going to ask you a question. This question, we've looked at, Michelle has just answered very well this issue of new brands getting started and how difficult that is. I wonder how hard it is for older, more established beauty brands. I mean, Elemis is a great example of that. Is it difficult for them to really switch over to being sustainable? And a question I want to ask straight after that is part of the remit for the Sustainable Beauty Coalition to supply new brands starting up with this kind of information about how they can do it? Because I'm getting lots of comments in the chat box with links to different organizations and requests from smaller brands. Can we see greater support from local authorities, for example, with recycling? And I'm just wondering if long term, is that somewhere the Sustainable Beauty Coalition wants to go, to help small brands to really start laying the ground right from the get-go as to how they wish to be sustainable? But before we get to that, Oriele.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a really interesting time. When we first started, we were a startup, and we were very close to nature, a lot of essential oils and plant extracts and seaweeds. And then as we grew and grew, it became more commercial, and we were under NASDAQ and then private equity. And, it became harder and harder, I think, to even have the bandwidth to think about sustainability. And a real turning point for us was being acquired by L'Occitane Group, hugely sustainable. And actually putting someone at the board, they asked if I'd become a board member to address sustainability of the brand, because that was the one area that we weren't ticking. And what I found so lovely was there were some really quick wins. We would have to have lovely fittings with little magnets that would close the box. We don't need magnets. 37,000 magnets, gone. We're not having them. Fitments for Christmas. Do we really need all this? Oh yes, but they keep it and they stop it damaging. Let's try. And we've done it this year for the first year ever. No plastic fitments. All cardboard. It can, it has its challenges. So you can be nimble. There are decisions that we've been able to just make. I'd be looking at our cleansing cloth and it comes in a little plastic bag. Get rid of the plastic bag. Can we just tissue wrap it? So I think we have been super nimble. I think where we've had now an investment into, we're going through the B Corp process. We've got everyone doing EcoVadis. We're doing the science-based targets. There is an investment, and that to get companies to invest in sustainability, makes a massive difference. And I think it's so key that we do, that we measure these things, that we make sure that our whole value chain is engaged in this. So I think, you know, it is possible to change, but I do think, you know, depending on who you're in and the environment you're in can make a big difference. And I've absolutely loved it. You know, in the 30 years of being at Elemis, this has probably been one of the most exciting years for me, because I can really see the next 5 years. You know, we're going to give 1% back of our revenue back to communities. We're looking at how that's going to work. We're looking at reimagining the packaging from scratch, as like almost like being an indie brand again. It's like by 2024, we want to have changed it all. So it's very exciting time for us.
I can see that must be exciting, because you have, you know, you've built this incredible company over such a long time, and now it's like a completely new chapter. It's as you say, which is exciting. My other question was, Sustainable Beauty Coalition, are you going to help these new brands if they need resources? Is that part of the remit for the people to come to you?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think when we all came together as a group, we were like, it's so confusing. If we're confused, is the consumer confused? So we only really started in the last couple of weeks on the Planet Positive, and we had Joe every Friday, wine o'clock. We would all get together, we'd come up with all the challenges, and it's just the start. We have to share. We have to share all our learnings as a business. And actually in that way we will become better. So, you know, we're looking at education. Can we actually hold more seminars? Can we explain some of these facts? You know, I didn't know how science-based targets work. Last week it all changed again. You know, we're going to have to share all that knowledge, that some of us are getting fed the correct information. We're working with Boots. They have a huge remit. We're learning all the time from what they're doing. So I think we're in a really new era. And I think probably the next stage, I mean, Jayn, if you want to interject, the next stage will be to take this to the next level, won't it?
Yeah, so in 6 months, what we've done is we've come together, we've put a wonderful steering group, wonderful advisory group, but we're just at the start of the journey. The Planet Positive Beauty Guide was our start at 10, just to say, if we're confused, everybody's confused. So let's just build some really strong foundations and agree. And hopefully you'll ask Jessi in a moment with her amazing work, the proof points that Provenance have created. You know, can we all agree what we mean by vegan or cruelty-free, whatever? If we can just build those really strong foundations, because then the next step for us will be to work with consumers, to work with the industry, and to start to put, like you said, lots of events, lots of sharing, really kind of teaching ourselves and educating ourselves how to work in a much more sustainable way. So it's early days, but I'm really delighted that we've been able to produce the Planet Friendly Beauty Guide, and it's version 1, and it will change because the landscape is changing every day, and we will get better and better. And through the network and coalition, we'll be able to share all of that learning.
Thank you. Jessi, we touched just briefly on, Elemis mentioned that they're striving for B Corp certification. And actually, Jayn, you just mentioned how we're learning and things are movable feast, which is one good thing about B Corp, because it does set new challenges for a brand every single year. But Jessi, I want to ask you, certification, is it something that we need to pay attention to? Is it really important for brands' endeavors? Which types of certification also really matter, because there's B Corp, there's circular economy, there's Leaping Bunny, there's PETA, there's Soil Association, there's FSC, there's a lot of them around. So which ones do we need to ignore? Maybe not ignore, but which ones are the ones we need to pay attention to?
Yeah, great question. And I think we've talked about how confusing it is as a consumer, let alone a brand. So I think that the certification question is a really important one. And I think we've also touched on some themes relevant to that, which is, you know, transparency, being open as a brand, being vulnerable on what you're doing and the progress you're making in an authentic way. And then we've also got the big old problem of greenwash, which I know was a big motivator behind the guide. Like, how can we make sure that you know, brands are competing not on marketing, but competing on impact? We want to get to a state where the best brands are the ones that are doing the most for people, for animals, for the planet, rather than just manipulating their story in the best way. So yeah. I do think third parties and independent authorities are quite an important part of that, because the reality is, step one, yes, be transparent as a brand and do so, up against some good reputable standards, so at least people can understand what you're doing. But step 2, it is really important to really show the change you're making in a credible way. And I do think one of the easiest ways to do that is working with third parties. So whether that's certifications like B Corp that help you every single year, try and get to where the beauty kitchen score is, like best in Europe or whatever, like good luck with that. But at least it's helping you kind of drive progress in your organization. And not just mark your own homework as well, right? Like everyone's going to pile into this. It's not just going to be these awesome pioneers that are already kind of paving the way. We're going to have all of these massive brands that come in and want to create change. But the reality is profit is still on the triangle for business alongside people and planet. And so we have to make sure that they're balanced. And I do think certifiers in the supply chains do help with that. So yeah, I'm a big fan of the credible ones. I think you have to watch out. There's a lot of badges that are sometimes being invented by the brand themselves to look like it's a certification, but it's not. So yeah, there's definitely ones to watch out for. But yeah, the kind of core, kind of reputable certifications, like ones that are part of the ISEAL Alliance, I think are really worth looking at, as well as kind of other organizations that help us set targets, like Science-Based Targets team. I think it's great too.
Thank you. Jessi, and also Helen, I'd like to bring you into this question as well. I'm always being told, or I'm always reading in surveys that, people really do care about what a brand does in terms of sustainability and perhaps charitable endeavors as well. But then often I hear from brand founders that this doesn't necessarily affect profits at all, and that actually some of their consumers don't care as much as perhaps we'd like to think. I mean, I'm preaching to the converted here. You clearly have a demographic of consumers who want to buy your brand because it is sustainable. But do you think that people really do care at the end of the day, if we take it beyond just your brands?
Yeah, I think people absolutely do care, and I'd almost challenge whichever brand founders you've been talking to about the charitable endeavours as well, because whenever we've done a charity product, they've sold out instantly. Consumers definitely care, especially as there's more information about the state of the world, there's more education out there, people are becoming more switched on. I mean, if you think back to when I was growing up from the age of social media, the situation was quite dire, but no one really knew about it because we didn't talk about it, it wasn't acknowledged on the news. I think it's only just this year that the BBC, for example, has put climate change as one of their key topics to talk about. I think people have always cared, but people realise now just how much we need to care and how much they need to hold the brands that they're using to account. So yeah, I think it's a bit mean to say people don't care. I think they definitely do.
No, I definitely agree. And I feel like the pandemic it has been a shift in favour of people caring more about the planet and supply chains and where things are coming from, which is great. But it's also, I think it's not just about consumers though as well. We also have to look at employees. You want to hire great people to work for you, and everyone now is wanting to their job, their day-to-day, to actually have a positive impact. So it's about that as well. And of course your shareholders, who are getting more vocal, who are and kind of coming behind these issues quite strongly. And we're all citizens, whether you're a consumer, an employee, a shareholder, whatever. But I think that doing the right thing and being shown to credibly be able to substantiate the impact you're having credibly is it's the only way the market seems to be moving right now.
I think sorry to pipe in here, but it depends on where in the world you are. Yes. And as to how far this is affecting the consumer, and what your culture with where you live, and how, if you can even afford sustainability in a way. So I think it depends globally. I think it is up to us to make that change and to go after the interested modern consumer and work with distribution channels and stores that really care about that stuff. But I think it is something that generally costs a little bit more as well. And it's all very well us all saying, oh, isn't it great we're doing these things? But if you're somewhere in Africa, a shampoo in a bit of a sachet is a luxury to you, or some other parts of the world. So I think all we can do is strive forward, start creating new things in different ways and telling that story. But to think that the whole world cares about this on a daily basis, I think we're being slightly naive about that, really, to be honest.
I think that's a really good point, because also it's about the definition of luxury, isn't it? And
Yeah.
really what will happen eventually if sustainability is the new luxury. So it will shift, as you say, Michelle, if we all keep inching forward. Michelle, I have another question for you, which perhaps is related. There's something, a little Emperor's New Clothes about sustainability. I mean, that's a bit of a problem, really, isn't it? Because we talked earlier about profit versus purpose. I mean, obviously we all want to save the planet, but really the best way to save the planet is to buy less. So, but then equally, as a business, you want people to buy more, or do you? Is it now that we need to just think about different ways of making excitement? Because the beauty industry is also about newness. It's about new technology, new ingredients, new shampoos, skincare, etc. How do we get rid of this incredible drive for newness in terms of buying something and create that excitement elsewhere, so that perhaps we buy less, but we buy things that last more or are better quality? I don't know.
Well, that's a really interesting question. I think my 17-year-old daughter is driving, you know, she doesn't buy any new clothes, actually. So, I think if I could give you an example, I mean, I've been touting this for 4 years now, less is more on every level, right? Okay, but and I think somebody on the panel mentioned about looking in your bathroom cabinet. I think it was Joe, but I tried to get that as a challenge 4 years ago for everybody to just look in the bathroom cabinet and have less. I think on many levels, as individuals, as groups, you can change. But when I was the CEO of Saint-Tropez, when you wanted to get into boots, your shelf space became really, really important. And you had to have at least 6 products to make it meaningful. Now that we have websites and you can just have one product that's really phenomenal, you know, that's one way that it's driving less is more. So brands, you know, don't have to do this whole big collection. I mean, for the last 4 years, I've walked into department stores and seen all these Christmas gift boxes all piled up. And to me, it just looks like landfill. It's you know, and I think the less is more can work, because you can refill, you know, do all sorts of things, and you can create newness in concept, in the way that you digitally tell the story of your brands, you know, engaging the consumer on different levels. I think you have to be smart, clever, inventive, and you don't need as much product for various different reasons. And even when you get an aeroplane now, which got back on one eventually, but you know, do we need those bags with all the minis in them and stuff like that? No, we don't, you know. So
I'd rather they gave us proper sandwiches.
Yeah, no, exactly. So I think this less is more has to kind of go across as a company as well, all of us. You do want more consumers. You do want to be more profitable, especially when you're a startup and you need to get to a point of profitability, you know. But it's how you do that, and how brands relate to the individual. That's how I would answer that, really, I think.
Joe, do you have any thoughts on that?
So I think it depends on what your commercials actually are. And I think it's how you want to talk to your consumer. Because if you want to talk to your consumer just once and get them to buy something just once, then you need lots of them, because they're buying it just once. So for me, it's about brand loyalty, and loyalty comes with trust, and it comes with storytelling, and it comes with depth, and it comes, I think it was Michelle that said this, it comes with authenticity. And I think, you know, that is what's really exciting about our industry at the moment, is that we're going through an evolution. It's a very diverse industry. It's female-led, one of the few industries in the world that's female-led. And I think we've got the opportunity to make real change. But I think that real change has to come with collaboration, and you have to understand your customer. But that is just good business. You know, any business would say that, whether they're a linear business or a circular business.
Thank you. Jayn, does it matter? I mean, you know, Weleda is obviously one of the greenest brands out there, and I'm a huge fan. I love everything they do, because it really, you feel like everything is very pared back, which is, there's something very beautiful in that. does it matter if a brand is green for purely commercial reasons? Or do you get a little bit frustrated when you see new brands coming up that are suddenly becoming all green? I mean, they might not be jumping on a bandwagon, but they can see that it makes commercial sense. So they're like, oh, okay, we better get with this. Does there a little bit of you that just thinks, you know, or are you embracing the green?
Yeah, that's again another great question, Kathleen. So if you look at the whole beauty market in the UK, or if you look at the beauty market globally, the brands that we're talking about, you know, clean, green, sustainable, whatever word you want to use, is somewhere between 5 and 10% of the total market. There is plenty of room to grow.
Okay.
For every brand that is doing it for the right reasons. And you know, you've heard thinking about people, thinking about environment, thinking about ingredients, thinking about farming, thinking about are ingredients biodegradable, etc., etc., etc. There is so much space. I get really cross though when I see proliferation of new product. Oh, okay. And when we go to see our supply partners, our retailers, whatever, and the question is, what is new? And the reason I get really cross is that the bestseller for Veleda is a product we created in 1926, and it's a product called Skin Food, and it's just the best moisturizer in the world. And you know, okay, I would say that, but seriously, guys, they all use it, right? It's a really fantastic product. So I get cross when, you know, you should spend 10 years to get the best product, and then you've designed it. And, you know, we've all said, and Michelle articulated it really well, think about every single thing that's going into that product, change everything that you can, and the things that you can't change, go back and change them over time. So get it right, make that product a hero, because 95% of all new products that get released onto the market are not around 3 years later. And I talked at the beginning about the innovation that we have in our industry and the money and the investment. And believe me, to get a new product to market costs millions, literally millions of pounds. If we channeled all of that money, not into new product development, but into making every single product more and more and more sustainable for the other 95% of the industry that isn't sustainable, then we're starting to rewrite the rules. And what we need to do, and I'm a reformed marketeer, I hate that word, I really do, it's like black magic. Well, just to think about what we're doing. So it's not about consumerism, and it's not about selling more, it's actually about being better and really improving every element of what we do, both from a product perspective, from a business practice perspective, from a charity perspective, from giving everybody a living wage, because business can be really good business. And if you go back to, I think it's 1971, Milton Friedman said that the purpose of business is to make a profit. Well, that is a load of rubbish, because the purpose of business can be really effective in building communities and really, you know, investing in society. And it's time that we embrace that in business and didn't see business as being something that's all about profit. And then the final thing I would say, I was picking up on what you said, Jo, it's really important for us as an industry to, number one, know that we are 3% of GDP in the UK. We are really significant. We have a lot of clout. And I think we forget that, because we are invariably an industry for women, led by women in the main. And if we just look what happened through COVID, you know, when you couldn't get your hair cut and you couldn't go to the salon, you couldn't do this. We don't just contribute 3% to GDP, we contribute an enormous amount to the wellness and the well-being of our society. And we need to stand up, we need to own it. So we need to stop playing the games and chasing profit and make really fantastic, sustainable products that will be around in 100 years' time, and keep making them better and better and better, and understand the value of our business into society.
I think value is really important. And I think as the language shifts, start to recognise the importance of emotion as well. I think that's then we'll start to see value in a different way. I just want to, we have so little time. But we have all these great questions, which is fantastic. I'm just going to very quickly ask a couple of them, and then I think we're going to have to say goodbye, sadly. But Joe Clayton wants to know, how do you suggest approaching sustainability in the beauty classroom to introduce learners in a way that's engaging and informative? Is there anything that Joe can use in the classroom now? Have you considered approaching exam boards to ask them to add this to the curriculum, which is a really interesting question. How are we teaching beauty? And I mean, we're not really teaching beauty as a subject, to my knowledge, yet, but in terms of educating people, how can you engage a younger person as they're, because actually that would be a great way to get the message through, I guess, in the bathroom as parents, perhaps, I don't know. Who wants to
this probably refers to more like beauty schools or hairdressing school, things like that, I would think. I'm making that up, but I think what I've learned to do is to listen, really. I think the younger people and the students are leading on the way that they're questioning and pushing things forward, and I think you can easily you know, bring this in. Education's a really huge, important part for all of us on this panel about really reaching the consumer. And we even if you're learning beauty, you're still a consumer. And I think it should come into curriculums, as in about the brands that you work with. So you might be supported as a salon by a big hair company, but you will have to make those choices, as look into that company and see whether or not they you know, are green criteria. So I think you can instill it in a way, but I think young people will probably lead us in the way to that, because they're demanding that they want to learn. They're asking all those questions at the very beginning of the process. So I think it's maybe about listening. It's a two-way street now, whether you're in, you know, a more senior person in the beauty industry. I'm learning more from the 20-something-year-olds in my teams than I ever have, you know. That's great.
I mean, Kathleen, we train 15,000 therapists a year. COVID has totally changed our training system. We have a Truth in Beauty platform. And now we're putting through that training with every product has a sustainability slide, and we're teaching them about sustainability. And it's very transparent. It's like, you know, this is glass, this is plastic, this is what's recyclable. And we're going to be putting that through all of our training, but also personally helping them understand how they can actually be more sustainable in their own way of living. So we're doing newsletters out to them all. The cold water cleansing went out to 600 people. We looked at how they're cleansing. So I think we have a responsibility to rethink our education to all of the people that we're working with. So I think we'll all be starting there.
I think that's really good. And actually, I was really taken by your comment about, you know, how we use things at home is also a great way to be more sustainable. And Rachel Halliday has asked, this is quite good. I love the idea of products where the consumer adds water at home. But the thing is, I live in London where the water is very hard. I come from up north where the water is soft. Is it possible for brands to make one type fits all tap waters? I mean, I totally understand what she says. Skin changes, your skin, your hair, everything changes dramatically. So I think that's maybe not, we would probably solve that one in this.
No, so there's actually an easy answer for that. You can actually get a filter for your tap that can fit onto either your shower or onto an ordinary faucet tap that actually has reusable, refillable filter inside, because we had to do that in Scotland. We have great water, obviously, but we were creating a hair care range and it had to work with all different types of water, and that is one of the easiest ways, and it costs about a tenner to buy the filter. If you didn't know that, there you go.
Okay, another question. This is from, I know I'm going to mispronounce your name, so apologies in advance, but, oh, hang on, it's just moved up the screen. Gomolemo Makolomako says, we are a small beauty brand and we use glass and wood, bamboo for lids, and recycled birchwood outer packaging. Is there a place we can find non-plastic pumps? We've also been investigating wheat straw material for pumps. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, that's very specific, but it's always the plastic pump that gets people, isn't it? So what's the solution for that?
Reuse it. It's that simple. So, you know, at the end of the day, there is lots of different innovations within the packaging industry, and pumps in particular are high on the list for personal care. But at the moment, the best solution for your customer is to get them to keep the pump and reuse it for the next product. It helps you with brand loyalty. It helps you with your sustainability steps, both as a customer and as a business.
Great, thank you. I'm going to pick one more question. But by the way, all these questions, I'm pretty sure I'm saying this correctly, but they will be answered by a member of the team. So I hope I'm just not landing you with extra work, everybody.
We'll answer them. We'll get around to it.
So this is someone has actually said, please could you note questions asked and answer them on your website? So that someone would be grateful if you could do that. How do you change the consumer's expectation for the perfect non-tamper packaging, the perfect gift pack? Because this obsession with overwrapping that we all have, what will convince the average consumer to change their expectations when appearance has become a huge buying choice? I mean, Michelle, you did that, didn't you, with the
pulp box here, yeah. But can I just tell you, this box, right? So we took it, Mecca took it, and they said our consumer is ready for this. The American said our consumer's not, so we made a beautiful, it's still FSC, but a sleeve over the top. So I'm hoping to be able to just merchandise like this. I think it is changing because now there's a lot more people. Like 4 years ago when I launched this, it was really, really difficult. I think stores play a big part in this. It's easier with a website. I just think we have to keep on, you know, explaining that this is luxury and showing that this is luxury. You know, I think Chanel have gone or L'Oreal have gone and used pulp like us now, and I guess those bigger brands can help all of us by leading the way by using those materials, really, because you can't really change consumer behavior on a big scale unless you've got a lot of muscle. So I think that's where the big boys can really help the whole cause of what we're all doing, is by helping change that consumer behavior with all their big funds and their big muscle to say this is the new way forward, you know.
And actually some of them are doing it.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, a lot of brands that don't look like they're particularly clean are actually surprising me with their refillable options. And so I take my hat off to you all. I'm going to wrap this up now but I'm sad to leave this because it's been honestly an honor listening to all your responses. They all feel very heartfelt, and seeing everybody's questions coming in just shows that, you know, there is a massive interest and a massive need, and I hope that you all keep up the good work, because clearly there's a hunger for it. So I'd like to just once again, just very quickly thank the British Beauty Council, the Sustainable Beauty Coalition, and also our sponsors for this event. Just a quick reminder, there is, as I said, the Planet Positive Guide is available on the British Beauty Council website. It might be the Sustainable Beauty Council website, Beauty Coalition website, so apologies. But I'd like to thank everybody, and also the sponsors once again, because you know, it's a new initiative, as everybody's been saying, and it wouldn't have happened without them. So thank you, and thank you to our incredible panelists.